This is a Relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Well, the trade war is on, my friends. Just hours before we're coming to you here recording this episode of Real Talk, Donald Trump made good on his threat to impose what some are describing as crippling tariffs on the Canadian economy, though I beg to differ, and so have a few of our guests. There are alternative measures. We'll talk solutions on Real Talk up to this point and moving forward, but the United States imposing on its most important and biggest trading partner, its closest geographical ally, an ally otherwise, by the way. Doesn't this feel like our best friend, our longtime next-door neighbor is kind of turning their back on us in a weird way for its own gain, reasons unknown, purportedly about fentanyl? We all know that that's not true, and we also know this is going to hurt the American people. So what's Donald Trump's end game? Is Canada making the right moves in the meantime, imposing retaliatory tariffs? And we're talking in the tens of billions of dollars here. Melanie Joly, Justin Trudeau, and the Liberal Brain Trust that's managing this file for now, saying that Canada won't waver, Canada won't break, Canada won't bend to bullies. Pierre Poilievre essentially saying the same thing. We reviewed that and went through it on our most recent episode of the show, March 3rd. If you didn't catch that conversation, encourage you to do so, including with political scientist Dr. Dwayne Bratt, Doug Griffiths from the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce, the CEO there and a former government cabinet minister. So different opinions. Johnny, I know that a lot of people were sort of thinking that, well, Trump's pressed pause for a month before on this stuff, so he could press pause again, but confirming essentially overnight that this was going to be a go. So that means today people are either in find a solution mode or implement the solution mode.
A lot of people already. I mean, I was watching TV this morning, listened to a few talk radio programs this morning, podcasts that are live.
What time are you waking up to be listening to all these radio shows?
I had some stomach issues last night. I told you I was up from
was it tariff related?
I was up from like 12:30 a.m. till 5. So, but everyone's saying the same thing. There's bad things about this, obviously the doom and gloom, but I think the good part about this is in the end, and we'll talk about it later after we talk to Jeromy and our other guests, but I think Canada's got to break down. We essentially have borders between the provinces. We've got to work better together. We've got to trade better. We've got to we've got to support local, and we've got to trade goods better. Like I was just saying this to you before we went on air. It's crazy that you can't bring a bottle of wine from BC to Alberta. You can't go to the LCBO in Ontario and bring back booze to Alberta.
Well, never mind that. Craft brewers in Alberta can't get their stuff into Ontario stores.
It's ridiculous. We're handcuffing ourselves. So I think the upside to this is Canada's going to get stronger and work together better. But man, it is going to be, who knows how long this will go. I hope it doesn't go till the summer. I hope it doesn't go longer than that, but who knows how long.
Kenzie is in our live chat powered by Park Power, and she just says, good morning, everybody. And I love that. Kenzie's just bringing some positive energy. This is like the dog in the room with the flames all around. This is fine. Vamp Fashion says retaliatory tariffs are the insane part. I don't know about that. It says all they do is further inflame the orangutan, but they also directly raise our cost of living. I know that Vamp's not alone in thinking that maybe the retaliatory move is not the right move, but it's what Canada's doing. It's what China's doing, and I don't think you just sit and take it, especially with an unpredictable leader like this. But let me get to a couple of things real quick. And as you alluded to, Calgary mayoral candidate Jeromy Farkas is going to join us today on the show. He's throwing his hat back in the ring, as we correctly speculated, by the way, here on the show months and months ago.
He's laughing right now. I can see him.
Well, when you get it, I'm gonna ask him what we win when we welcome him to the show here. But when the show calls it and the show is right, we got to point it out. When we call something and it doesn't happen, you'll notice we just quietly sweep it under the rug. But Jeromy Farkas will join us, as will Mark Hall. He's the director of Blood Orange Canada. They're a hunting advocacy group. Mark's been a friend of the show. That doesn't mean he always agrees with what he hears on the show, and he didn't love our coverage of the cougar hunt in Canmore. That's fine. I think Mark comes in probably to today's episode with a strong opinion, and so do I. So we'll see where this goes, and we'll be looking to the live chat for some direction on that. But that's what Real Talk's all about, friends. We seek to understand. Okay, that's the whole point. In the context of tariffs today, which is what everybody's going to be talking about in North America, quite frankly, the question is, what is the cost and who's going to pay it? Vamp saying that he doesn't like it because retaliatory tariffs will raise our cost of living. That's true. That's a fact. In so many ways as the U.S. tariffs on Canada will raise Americans' cost of living. It's going to raise their cost of doing business. Our buddy Senator Charles Adler tweeting about this morning. He's pointing out the Spectator Index reporting that this is a GDP Now forecast, Johnny. U.S. GDP growth for the first quarter for Q1 has dropped. It's dropped more than a point. Okay, so this is not a good thing, obviously, for GDP growth in the United States. And Charles Adler, Senator Adler, saying Trump is not in a fight with Canada. He's in a losing battle with math. He says, unlike Republicans, math has a spine that's as strong as Canadian steel. Adler has a way of pissing off millions of people with just one sentence. I think he's dragging all the Republicans into this.
He does have a way about him.
But the thing about it is that Republicans kind of have to own this one because this is your president, this is your policy. So Trump is the one that promised a lower cost of living for Americans. I don't think that's going to happen. As a matter of fact, I'm quite certain that it's not going to happen as a result of this. What is the end game? That's the question. You remember when Doug Murray joined us just a short time ago? This is Dr. Murray. He's the senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute and a political scientist. He joined us on the 21st of January. So this was the day after Donald Trump's inauguration. And we asked, what does Trump's so-called golden age mean for Canada? And really great analysis from Dr. Bob on a ton of different stuff. I wanted to do something we don't always do, and I noticed that in follow-up to his January 21st appearance on the show, you can find that in our YouTube archive, you can find it in our podcast archive, Dr. Bob has been active on his personal Facebook today. Now, I don't typically show people's personal Facebooks on the show, but he's talking about some professional stuff. I thought we could share it. So here's an update from Dr. Bob Murray. He says, some thoughts on Tariff Day. Number one, he says to his fellow Canadians, remain calm, he says. This is the first salvo and counter move by Canada in what will be, at some point, a negotiated settlement. Number two, he says, this is going to hurt. Says it's intended to hurt, to achieve bargaining leverage quickly and selfishly for the Americans. It's kind of what Doug Griffiths had to say on the show yesterday, isn't it? It says, three, this is not random, however misplaced. There is thinking behind this. Four, Canada must focus on immediately and dramatically increasing its domestic and global competitiveness. He says we're still stuck in neutral. And he talks about that Team Canada approach, Johnny, that you're referencing, that Doug Griffiths referenced on our March 3rd episode of the show, those interprovincial trade barriers. Shauna Feth was talking about that too from the Alberta Chambers of Commerce when she joined us 2 weeks ago. Bob says we got to still find ways to engage with the U.S. through this turmoil. I think that might have to be number one on my list. Isn't that the truth, right? He says may not be through the White House, but states and industry remain crucial economic partners. And he says, number six, stop lamenting the end of the post-World War II world order. It's over, he says. It's time to plan and act according to what now is. I thought that was wild on yesterday's show where we're saying we may have to imagine a G7, a NATO, without maybe a United Nations without the United States. Isn't that wild?
Just seems insane. It seems insane to even think of.
Yeah.
You know,
there have been meetings, these agents, these organizations that we're referencing, they are now meeting. They met yesterday, the day before we're recording this. They met without the Americans after Trump, following that Oval Office debacle with Vladimir Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, pulled all American military aid to Ukraine right now. So this is getting very real for Ukrainians. It's getting very real for Canadians today, for the Chinese, for Mexicans. And of course, this is very real for as Bob references, for this sort of world order, that dynamically changing world order. We welcome your thoughts on this to talk at RyanJesperson.com. We're going to get into this a little bit more in the show, but we've got a lot of ground to cover, including with Jeromy Farkas coming up in 30 seconds. First, I want to let you know, no matter where in Canada you're watching this from, you're listening to this from, you may also be noticing what's happening with crypto. Donald Trump's talking about this strategic reserve in the United States. My personal advice on this, don't buy any of the coins he's talking about. But you notice as well with the kind of flagship, with Bitcoin, there's been a lot of movement there too, up and down and up and down. And if you're working in finance as an advisor, if you're a financial planner, chances are your clients have questions about this, including and most especially the next generation of investors. Polling shows 75% of them are interested in decentralized finance. You want to know what you're talking about. You want to have credibility, which is why Business Career College, a leader in online financial training since 1997, has rolled out their Certified Digital Asset Advisor designation. The CDAA covers everything from the foundations of how Bitcoin and the blockchain actually work to next-gen cryptocurrencies and strategies for advising your clients. That's the most important thing. Future-proof your own career with the CDAA designation at businesscareercollege.com. Don't forget the promo code Ryan20 will knock 20% off this investment in your career when you get started today at businesscareercollege.com. Well, everybody in Alberta knows Jeromy Farkas. He was a well-known and oftentimes headline-grabbing city councillor in Calgary, ran for mayor, didn't go how he had hoped, and then that's kind of when Farkas 2.0 launched. More people got to know him for summiting peaks and raising hundreds of thousands of dollars for charities, for sticking up for environmental protection of areas in and around his beloved hometown, and for his advocacy in areas that seemed almost incongruous with his previous political involvement, which seemed to center on that kind of conservative fiscal hawk type approach. So as Farkas throws his hat back into the ring, he wants to be Calgary's mayor, and he's back looking for that seat at jeremy.ca. The question is, what's changed? What's different now? As we welcome Jeromy Farkas to the show. Congratulations on the big launch. This has been a long time coming. That was my guess anyway. When did you know that this was a go?
I made the decision, and thanks so much, Ryan, for having me. I guess I don't have to ask this morning what the topic is because I'm baked into the roster. But I made the decision earlier this year. I was looking at a city hall that was really stuck. We saw council members wasting time, wasting money, out of touch, picking petty fights, and had to do a bit of soul searching, chatting with folks, figuring out what is it that Calgary needs right now. And I think we really landed on this central problem and opportunity that nobody else is talking about, Ryan. In the next decade, Calgary is going to more than double in size to be a city of 3 million people. This is probably one of the biggest challenges and opportunities that we're ever going to face as a city, and we have to be ready. But unfortunately, right now, we see a city hall that's stuck, not able to gain traction, not able to meet today's needs around jobs, housing, safety, trust, let alone be ready to future-proof us. So that's what I'm running on, is a financially and socially responsible platform to try to pull together Calgarians to be able to really just pull in the same direction and to meet the moment. Right now is such an exciting time to be alive. Look, we are under siege as a country. We are at economic war. Right now, we need the best ideas from across the spectrum to be able to rise to this moment. And that's what I'm hoping to be able to do as Calgary's next mayor.
I haven't heard anybody yet here on tariff morning, on the launch of the trade war, to describe it as an exciting time to be alive. But maybe we need to be reminded of that. We're getting little shots of adrenaline.
Well, if you can't laugh, you have to cry, right?
But doesn't that bring the best out in us, right? I've got a ton of questions for you, but let me ask you first, why do you think, you're not in council chambers, obviously you're paying attention, but you're not on the team right now, or you're not representing a ward or constituency right now. So in your assessment as an observer, why is Calgary's council stuck?
Well, I think we need leadership that knows how City Hall works so that we can get it to work for us. And I think a lot of it's the overly partisan environment. And look, you see council members who will refuse to even consider ideas or motions that are brought up by folks on the other side of the floor. And I think at the municipal level, the ideal is that you can be practical, you can be pragmatic, you can be visionary, and you can judge your colleagues' ideas based on, is it a good idea? Is this good for our constituents? Is this good for the city? Rather than the color of the jerseys. And they say that you can't play hockey with only a left wing. And I think the same thing applies to cities. I think it's nuts and bolts. It's when does the garbage get picked up? What's the frequency of the pools being open? These are the nuts and bolts. It's library schedules. It's water main infrastructure, right? It doesn't have the room for the kind of BS that we see playing out in those partisan environments down east in Ottawa or down south of the border. So that's the ideal. And I think the moment right now is to push back against the introduction of those municipal political parties. I think that this is just poison to effective, rational local government. We do not need that type of garbage approach to politics. And I think this is the moment for Calgarian voters to be able to push back and say that we want an independent city council. We want one that is going to be able to set us up for the future and to be able to address today's needs. And we're going to need a mayor and council that can do just that.
So you're not running as part of a team. You're not launching a political party along with your campaign?
Well, I'm running as an independent so that I can build that team as a council, right? Today, as a nonprofit director and a CEO, I work across party lines because I want to get stuff done. In my work, I pull together, say, the grassroots and business leaders, uh, ranchers and environmentalists, conservatives and progressives to be able to fight for and protect what matters most. So running as an independent means I want the best ideas from across the spectrum. I want to be able to judge an idea and a person based on what they can contribute so that we can get the best ideas for the best results. So it's about building that team rather than having the kind of rancorous environment that we're seeing from this council today.
Yeah, but you know as well, you know better than I do that mayors, essentially in unison across the province have lamented, these bills, including Bill 20. I mean, the introduction of these political parties at the municipal level. What they're describing is, my word's not theirs, but basically like a bully approach from the provincial government, this UCP government that talks a lot about the feds staying in their lane, but really hasn't stayed in its own lane when it comes to municipal politics. I think that's fair criticism. What's different about how you would approach this? What sort of gives you a leg up on any incumbent mayor right now that's already crying foul?
Well, the reason that I'm doing this is I think I'm really in a unique position to be able to speak to both progressives and conservatives. And I think we need the kind of leadership in the city that can be socially and financially responsible. And look, my track record as a nonprofit CEO, my involvement in a lot of other organizations shows a record of being able to actually get results. And you can look at, and thank you, Ryan, for profiling us last year, but you can look at the results that we got with the Glenbow Dam. The UCP for a time was considering tearing up the contracts that had allowed for Haskayne Park and Glenbow Ranch to be donated to Calgarians and Albertans. And we had to mount an advocacy campaign. We had to set out the facts. We needed to work with the provincial government. And ultimately, we got our way and we were able to advocate for those parks to be protected. So again, I want to run as somebody who can work with anybody across the spectrum in order to get results, not just opposing for the sake of opposing or supporting for the sake of supporting. I want to know what's right and what's best for Calgarians and our city. And I want to start with that as the foundation to be able to get results from this provincial government when they might be offside with the interests of our local municipality.
What are you saying to people at the doors, the like hardcore Farkas supporters, the ones that are showing you the buttons and the lawn signs they've had from the very first time you sought office, that are a little concerned now that you're going a little soft, that you're meeting people in the middle and that you're doing all this work for charity and fundraising and that you're not that kind of, prickish fiscal hawk that they want representing them at City Hall? What are you telling those people?
Well, you don't need to be an asshole, right? That's the whole point. Is it's fine to be a fighter, but you got to be fighting for someone rather than just against something. Look, they say that you can take, I grew up in East Calgary, right? So you can take the kid out of Dover, but you can't take the Dover out of the kid. The city's grown in the past 10
Jeromy,
years.
for people outside of Calgary, hang on.
I've learned that leadership means attacking the problem rather than the person. It means owning your mistakes, and it means not having to be the smartest person in the room. I'm at a point in my career where I want to build. I want to contribute. I want to get this done. And the enthusiasm is there. It's the type of enthusiasm that drives a person to do some borderline stuff like climbing 25 peaks in 25 days or starting running alone across the continent for 172 days. Look, I follow through on what I say I'll do. And I think that this is the challenge that we have with this current leadership. We have a mayor who had campaigned largely on bringing folks together, providing stability, taking that middle of the road approach. But what I want to emphasize is that this is not a rematch. This is not about the past 4 years. This is about Calgary. This is about all of us. And this is about the city that we have to be ready to meet that next decade. We're going to more than double in size to 3 million people with huge constraints and challenges on our services, our infrastructure. This is why I'm running. It's not to be a rematch. It's not to bring the same failed approaches from 10 years ago. I want to get this done for our city, and I want to pull together progressives and conservatives to be able to get it done.
It kind of is a rematch, whether you call it that or not. It is a rematch.
Well, the issues are different, right? I think, look, where Calgary is at is going to require leadership that can speak to both conservatives and progressives.
And you also
be a counterweight to the provincial government and provide and really produce results.
You also, I can't speak to your inner inner core character. But I think most people know that you and I have a friendly relationship off camera, and that we correspond off camera, and that and et cetera, et cetera. And like, you do strike me as a different, like, not, I don't want to say a different person. That's not what I mean. But like, you've got a different vibe from the last election, don't you? Like how would you describe it?
Well, I would say it's really humbling, and we've discussed this a little bit previously, but I'd say losing the election was one of the best things that could have possibly happened to me.
Sure.
It really taught me who my friends were, and there's certain things that you can learn about the world and learn about yourself that really only comes about from failure. And I want to use absolutely everything that I've learned to be able to contribute. And I've been really grateful to you, Ryan, as well as Real Talkers more generally, many of whom are actually on our campaign, who have given me that latitude, have given me that room to be able to grow into who I am today. I'm not running against myself. I'm not running from myself. I want to use everything that I've learned to be able to contribute in this moment for Calgary. And the momentum has been stunning. I think in the first 24 hours that we had launched our campaign, we brought in more donations and more website signups than any other 24-hour period from 2021. So I'm just very much on a personal level, Ryan, very humbled by the fact that people are listening, they're open to what I have to say. And that's the position that I want to run from, is to be able to bring together the best ideas. And look, it's going to be a 7 or 8 month interview. It's probably one of the most intense, borderline painful interview processes that anybody will have to go through for a job. But, I am running in this election to win it. I am running for us to be able to address today's needs around jobs, around housing, around safety, around trust. And I want to give Calgarians something to vote for rather than just against.
This it's obviously an interesting time for the entire province, and we were talking about huge infrastructure projects and like a big influx. I mean, anticipated population growth and those types of things. Calgary, if I think of the past 12 to 24 months, one of the biggest stories in Calgary is that water main disaster, these collapsing pipes. It kind of reiterated, I think, to people, honestly, probably people across the country, but certainly people in this province, about infrastructure deficits and the like. Calgary is like heavily reliant on property taxes right now. And this is an era. Interesting. We spoke just yesterday about the provincial budget, and Dr. Dwayne Brad, also out of Calgary, not convinced that that Danielle Smith's Conservatives should be implementing this tax cut right now. He says we're borrowing money for a tax cut at a time where money's tight. Doesn't make sense. But people know you as the guy that keeps an eye on the bottom line and the finances, and they're going to want you to keep those property taxes low. So how are you going to balance? I mean, let's not get into the boring shit, but what's your general approach to this, and how are you going to reconcile everything I've just laid out?
Well, we got to make the existing money go further, and we need to make things easier for ourselves. So there's certain decisions, we've discussed this previously, like how does the city council have $1 billion in cash for a new arena so that 96% of the cost of this new facility is borne fully by the public, with 100% of the proceeds going to the Flames, right? So why do we have $1 billion in cash for that? But we're going to have to borrow about the same for the next 35 years to be able to fix our pipes. That is not progressive. That is not fiscally conservative. That's just insane. So when you look at, say, Calgary's my hometown. Calgary's the best in many, many ways. But one way that you actually beat us, Ryan, is the city of Calgary has about a 25% loss rate on our water system. Comparatively, Edmonton has about 5 or 6%. This is one example that if we actually spent the money properly to maintain this, be proactive, it'll pay dividends down the road. So it's not just about restraining current spending. It's also thinking about ways that we can invest to be able to reduce the burden for taxpayers and ratepayers down the road. But, there's a lot more to that. We're more than just taxpayers. We're more than just our jobs. We need to find ways to be able to meet the moment as far as all of the services and infrastructure that a city needs. And that makes the existing money go further. And I believe that on that debate stage, I have unique credibility in this. Look, I put my money where my mouth is. I declined the city council golden pension. I'm going to be the only person on that stage without that golden pension or that golden parachute, because I live in the real world. I want to solve real problems. And that means addressing things with a system approach. So look, there's this constant debate between progressives and conservatives in terms of, do we address the results of crime through policing, or do we be proactive? Well, I think we need to be both. I think that we need to be tough on crime and also provide enough police infrastructure in the meantime so that we can actually solve this problem. But something I really push on fiscal conservatives about is there is no such thing as being fiscally conservative unless we can actually address some of these root causes and be proactive rather than just responding in crisis mode.
You've got credibility, you've got your fans in conservative circles, but are you concerned about your ability to work with this provincial government?
Well, I think on that debate stage, I'm going to be the only person who actually has a compelling story about being able to work with either. Like, who as a candidate for mayor can actually demonstrate in the recent months being able to get to a deal with the provincial government, to be able to get them to back down on something that they had initially planned for, and actually not just fight and beat them, but actually come up with a better result that protects the parks as well as will protect Cochrane and Calgary from flooding, which is what we're able to do with the Glenbow Dam Advocacy Project. But on the other hand, I'm easily friends with somebody like Naheed Nenshi. You know, it doesn't mean that I suddenly agree with them on everything, but I think that that's the kind of leadership that we're going to need from our next mayor, is somebody who can work with the best people to be able to drive the best ideas for the best results. And we need that level of pragmatism. Calgary's in a different place than we were 4 or 10 years ago. And this campaign is really going to be about the future. The issues have changed, and I'm running to be able to bring Calgarians together with that type of pragmatic leadership to be able to meet the challenge of the next decade.
Yeah, Les, just want to give him a shout out. Toss $5 into our super chat on YouTube. Thanks, Les, asking if you'd be able to work with either a UCP or an NDP government. I think you just named that. It's interesting. Like, if it's an NDP government, number one, there's not a provincial election for like 3 years, so it's not really an immediate type of thing. It's not in the top 3 questions, but I understand why Les is asking it. Behind the scenes, behind the curtain a little bit, I think people might be interested to know that in my correspondence with your campaign team, there are some familiar names. There are people in senior positions on your campaign team that were in very senior positions with Naheed Nenshi. And I think that might blow some people's minds.
Well, I am running in this moment at this time, and that I think I can do something that nobody else can in terms of speak to both progressives and conservatives. Look, I am at a point in my life where I want to build. I want to contribute. Our city and me both, I think we're now old enough to know, but still young enough to do. And this is not something I can tell, it's only something I can show. And in terms of the dream team that we're building, look, it comes from across the spectrum. We have folks who are in senior roles, say with the former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. We have folks who are work closely with Naheed Nenshi. We have folks who are on the Bill Smith campaign. We have folks who worked with Rick McIver. We had folks who worked with Barb Higgins. A lot of the other folks across the spectrum, business leaders, the grassroots, nonprofit leaders. And I'm at a point in my life where I can convene. I can bring those people together. And it's a story that we're not just going to tell. It's something that we're going to be able to show, because I really genuinely believe the Calgary is at its best when we can be practical, when we can be focusing on the nuts and bolts of what can actually be possible in our city and pulling in the same direction to be able to get it done. And I'll be the first to admit that I wasn't ready 5 years ago. This was not a skill that I had 5 years ago, but I'm going to be able to show Calgarians through our platform, through the team that we're building, through the ideas that we're putting forward, that we have that plan, we have that ability to meet the moment, not just around today's issues, around jobs we can count on, housing we can afford, safe streets for our kids, not just in terms of those things, but actually addressing today's acute needs around crime and safety, all of the other problems. And look, we are in economic trade war. We need all hands on deck. We need all the best possible ideas to be able to get this done. And I'm not going to be particular. If you have a great idea and you want to contribute, I don't care what side of the spectrum you came from, because at the end of the day, you're Canadian, you're Calgarian, and you want to get it done. And I think that needs to be respected and empowered.
We talked to Calgary's current mayor, Dr. Jody Gondek, the morning after she won, and she touch on something. I said, what's the number one thing? What's the top of the pile? What's the first thing on your desk? And her answer to that question turned that episode into a top, Johnny, I think it still is a top 10 or top 15 downloaded episode all time because it spread like wildfire. And I think that hardcore audience members will know exactly what I'm talking about. She said, we're in a climate emergency, and it sent like ripples across the province and across the country. And some people were lighting their hair on fire, and other people were saying, this is incredible that the mayor of Calgary would say this. We need to address this, and that's Canada's energy capital. And wow, read into it what you will. It was a remarkable statement. Now, you've been a staunch supporter of the oil and gas industry for a long time, but there is no denying that there is a global energy transition. I, as a born and raised Calgarian, think that that city has an incredible opportunity to remain Canada's energy capital with some of the smartest people in the world for decades to come, but that is going to have to take strategic attraction of talent, attraction of investment. I know I don't need to explain this to you, but how do you make that happen?
Well, I think it's just the same as you said. I think we need a mayor who's going to be able to advocate for the oil and gas sector by fighting for policy certainty. We need investment-friendly regulations. We need infrastructure that supports growth. We need to be going from coast to coast to coast to be able to make the case to these local communities to be able to support expanded market access, not just because it's good for Calgary or good for Alberta, because it's what we need today as a country. But I think we have to work to ensure that Calgary remains a global energy hub, right? I am for oil and gas, but I'm for renewables. I'm for all of the above. And as that pie is growing, I want a bigger slice, right? I think for too long, this has been sort of a conservative versus progressive debate. Well, should we be for oil and gas or should we be for renewables? I think it's all of the above. While there is a market for a traditional oil and gas product, we should sell that. It should be sustainable. It should be in line with human rights practices. It should be environmentally friendly to the extent that it can be, so that we can crowd out other competitors on the world stage, like, say, Saudi Arabia, Russia, and whatnot. There's an ethical case to be made for our oil and gas industry here today in Canada. But I also think that we can't have a blind spot in terms of the innovation that's happening. So when it comes to, say, the pushback we're seeing against wind turbines around solar panels, I think that it's a bit silly. Like, why would we not want to be the energy superpower, period, which means all of the above? So again, it's not just about energy here in Calgary. We got to be able to grow our film, tourism, and creative industries. We need to be able to continue to showcase our city globally. We have to expand, agriculture, agritech. We can, as Calgary is a logistics hub, we can help leverage our farming expertise. We can strengthen logistics and transportation. We can expand through projects like connecting the Calgary airport with other local residential areas, as well as our national parks. So why don't we position ourselves as a major trade hub by really just fostering that business-friendly environment so that we can attract these new industries and create the jobs that we can count on. Stable, long-term jobs for Calgarians and for Canadians. So I'm not hung up on, and again, I come working from a conservation environmental background. I get why we have to be thinking globally and acting locally, but why not just leave aside some of the past kind of bullshit arguments, either or? It has to be all of the above, and that's the type of leadership that I wanted to bring to the table as Calgary's next mayor.
You and I will be we'll be doing interviews, through to the fall with, all the serious candidates in the major Alberta municipalities. So you and I will speak again, and we'll speak with the other candidates as well. So we make it into some of the more nitty gritty, some of the more policy stuff. There's not a ton of policy on your website right now, but you wanted to get your name out there, I'm assuming, and let people know you're running, start the fundraising, start building your team. But I do want to ask you about one specific story, because I think the whole province has been paying attention to the Green Line in particular. And again, because this has blurred the lines of jurisdictions and who should be running these projects, and obviously huge costs. We see that in both big Alberta municipalities, like hundreds of millions, even billions of dollars on these LRT expansions and the like. Just a short time ago, Calgary City Council and the province reached an agreement. The word agreement these days, what does that even really mean? I'm not sure who had like 50-50 input on this, but regardless, the Green Line is getting built. There's some elevated track sections, which I know not everybody loves. What's your assessment? What's your take? What would be your plan if anything could change if you were elected mayor?
Well, I think that this whole situation's been a failure of leadership. There's not been the initiative that was required from the city of Calgary to actually build and execute. And I think there's been a bit of a political vacuum here where bluntly, I think the province has an interest in ragging the puck and delaying this a little bit so that it becomes an NG nightmare that they can use in a political way against the opposition. And I think we also see a city council that's just so politically weak in that they're also happy with punting. But meanwhile, Calgarians who live in the far north and the far south are still going to be waiting potentially decades to be able to get the service that they need, the service that they were promised when they chose to build in those communities and to make their life there. So that's the part one. Is I think that this has been a failure of leadership in terms of the city of Calgary asserting itself. But part two is there's been a tremendous lack of transparency in terms of what is actually going to be built. I think it's generous to describe what has been agreed to as a plan. It's very much still back in the napkin. It has not been vetted nearly as much as it needs to in terms of on the engineering side. And then I also think as just a Calgarian, it's very difficult to provide a critique of it when there's that lack of transparency in terms of what is actually going to be built and what the impact will be on Calgary's downtown, as well as our property values and the ridership costs associated with that. Taking a step back, I always thought that the objective was not to build a train. It was not to move trains. It was to move people. It was to build a robust, functioning transit and transportation system that Calgary needs. And along those lines, it would have made more sense to start with a bus rapid transit project that would have spanned from the far north to the far south. And I would have built it with LRT quality stations, completely grade separated. I'm not talking about painting some lines on a road. I'm talking build it actually to the LRT spec, but short of the trains and the tracks and the wires. And once we had the ability to, or the funding rather, to be able to build a phase two, then we could upgrade what we built to be able to now accommodate trains. But right now, we're basically going from nowhere to nowhere. And it's not something that Calgarians, I think, are comfortable with accepting 100% of the cost overruns. So look, the province is acting as if they were the majority partner. If they are going to act that way, I believe that they should be taking on a significant portion of the operating costs, as well as the assurances, and that if they are asking for specific changes that could make the project much more costly or unpredictable from an engineering standpoint, if they're demanding these things, they should be the ones on the hook for the cost overruns that might be associated with that.
Yeah, respectfully, you can say that, but you know they'll never pay for it. they're downloading more costs on municipalities right now than probably ever. I'm freewheeling here. I'm not fact checked on this, but my guess would be that this is probably the hottest moment in Alberta's history when it comes to the transfer of funds from the province to municipalities. That's certainly the vibe I'm getting from mayors and from groups we talk to. Do you have that same sense?
Well, I think the this last provincial budget, I think there's definitely areas of improvement. Look,
Yeah.
they are going to be, Mayor Sohi was effective in getting the province ultimately within 2 years to be paying their property taxes in full in terms of the grants that they issue for the provincial land that they got a tax break essentially on for paying the tax bills. Look, we got a commitment as well to the low income transit pass as far as the provincial contribution. I think that's a good thing, but there's going to be other areas just in terms of how do we build and sustain that growth. Municipalities, again, collect about 8 cents on the dollar for every tax dollar that's collected in this country. So when it comes to the bulk of everything that people think of that governments deliver, say roads, public safety, infrastructure, all of the rest, a good 80% of it is municipalities, despite the fact that they get 8% of the funding. So I think that it's going to be a continuous refrain in terms of, well, if the province has these very ambitious goals around population growth, if they are wanting to see Calgary to be a city of 3 million people in the next decade, what are the services and infrastructure that's going to be required for that? And it is a bit of a sort of a bright spot to see some increases to the local grant funding for infrastructure, but it is tied to oil and gas revenue, which increases the volatility significantly. So when you think of capital outlays, when you think about building for the future, you want to have certainty regardless. The amount of people here in Calgary still require services regardless of what the price of oil might be. So I would like to get off of that roller coaster. I would like to be able to have some predictability and certainty so that we can actually be proactive and say solving the water loss rates of our pipes, building the infrastructure that we need to be able to continue to provide the quality of life that Calgarians need. But right now, the way that we're going about it is extremely unpredictable. It's very prone to the political winds. And what I think municipalities are rightfully asking for is to be a partner in this delivery of services and infrastructure rather than just let's say a kid at the table asking for scraps. We are a partner. We are an order of government. We are not a junior order of government. We are equals as far as the delivery of these services go. And I think that that's going to be continue to be a refrain we see from Alberta municipalities, and it certainly will be the approach that I bring to the table as Calgary's next mayor.
Jim's looking for inspiration here. Jim is either a pessimist or a realist. I don't know, but he's watching us on YouTube, checking in on the Real Talk live chat. Powered by Park Power, your friendly local utilities provider. Jim says the next Calgary Council will likely be more divided than ever, serving larger interests rather than the people they serve. Maybe you can prove him wrong, Jeromy, if you win. Lorraine says Jeremy's done the work since the last election and he's a better person for it. And Ken, another $5 into the super chat. And Jeromy, you're a Real Talk regular. You know what that does. That fills our beer fridge. Ken says, as an Edmontonian, I can't vote for Jeromy, but I can buy him a soda. Best of luck. I don't blame you for saying you and us when you're talking to me. We're obviously headquartered out of Edmonton, but I'm a born and raised Calgary kid, so I follow these municipal elections. My family's still there with great interest. I think that you add depth and credibility and seriousness, and you're obviously a significant contender here in this mayoral race, and so we wish you well, and we'll talk to you again, obviously, before the election this fall. Thanks for making time for us.
Sounds good, Ryan. Thanks so much.
Yeah, you bet. You can check out Jeremy's website. We've been showing it to you through this interview at jeromy.ca. Just a reminder, that's JEROMY.ca. Jeromy Farkas, our guest. I was trying to step on his toes there earlier in the interview. I was trying to interrupt him for a quick second, but he was in debate mode. So your debate coaches will tell you, once you start talking, don't stop talking. But when he was setting the scene, I wanted to set the tone, set the scene for what he was about to say, and from where he was born and raised, from when he grew up. And for people outside of Calgary, Jeromy Farkas is a Dover kid. I grew up in Woodlands, Parkland, and Mackenzie Lake, and we always knew you don't want to fight the kids from Dover, Ogden, or Forest Lawn.
Dover, eh?
You don't want to fight them. You don't want to get into it. They were some of the most heated high school football games, high school basketball games. They were always nasty and gnarly. Everybody had their elbows up. I love it. It's just kind of like every city has that spot where they're conditioned. They're perfectly fine in the trenches. They're
rough and
happy.
tumble.
So we'll see. I'm looking forward to talking to the other candidates there, and obviously we'll be doing the same here in Edmonton. And we want to serve, we pay attention to our analytics, to our numbers. We know where our audience is joining us across the country and across Alberta, and we want to make sure that if you're one of our regulars and if you're going to be involved in this next municipal election, this is a big deal. It'll be more on the back half of this year. Not going to bullshit you. There's other stuff happening right now that's more on people's radar. But of course, we want to offer Alberta's most fulsome, best, and most credible campaign coverage. And so we'll be continuing to have these interviews, and we welcome your feedback anytime to talk at ryanjesperson.com. Coming up in just a quick second, another story that people have been paying attention to, and this is this controversial cougar hunt in Alberta, in particular one outside Canmore. Johnny Marriott, the wildlife conservation photographer that kind of discovered it and was the one that was posting the videos. He came and talked to us about it on the show. It was an explosive episode, quite frankly. Didn't land well with our next guest. And we're all about having these conversations. So we're going to welcome Mark Hall from Blood Origins Canada coming up in just a quick second. Before we do, in our home province of Alberta, it goes without saying, we're proud to have world-class universities, including this one in Edmonton, delivering great education to students, combining critical research to the world. We got to protect teaching and research at the U of A. And the way that you can help do that is by sending a letter to the Premier, to the Minister, to the Chair of the Board of Governors right now. The U of A's academic staff, at the heart of the teaching and research, are the ones that are making that university exactly what it is. And massive cuts are putting that at risk. And leadership at the U of A, quite frankly, just isn't investing in frontline learning. Have your say today at supportthespark.ca and help keep Alberta's future strong. This is a message from the Association of Academic Staff of the University of Alberta. You know, this week we're remembering our wonderful friend Kyle Dubé. March 3rd marked the anniversary of his unexpected passing. This guy was an unbelievable force in the nonprofit ecosystem in Alberta and across the country, and in particular at UCAN Youth Services. Put simply, this guy was an absolute beauty and one of the most inspirational people you ever would have had the honor of meeting. And his legacy is continuing at UCAN Youth Services today and moving forward. You can learn more about Kyle's legacy and what UCAN is doing, transforming the lives of young adults 18 to 25 that simply need pathways into education or employment opportunities. That's ucan.ca. We remember Kyle Dubé this week and every week, inviting you to join us at UCAN Comedy Nights mid-March, the 10th to the 12th, 17th to the 19th. You can find all the details again on their website. That's ucan.ca. It's tax season, like it or not. A lot of people are talking about TFSAs right now, and now that we're into this new calendar year, into the spring, and you can add to your registered accounts. You know, this year there's additions up to $7,000 that you can add to your TFSA if you're in a position like that, a combined total contribution room of more than $100,000 for adults since 2009. But the question is, what type of investment should you be putting in your TFSA? If you're a taxable investor, this choice can have a dramatic effect on your after-tax portfolio success. Our friends at North Road Investment Council would love to speak with you about how you can reduce the taxes that you're paying on your investments. Investing is rarely simple, friends. Don't go it alone. Contact North Road through their website today at northroadic.com. We're all about anniversaries. By the way, John Hicks, take your camera, look into that camera, and take your congratulations as we observe 3 years with John Hicks at Relay. 3 years, Johnny, producing this show. And it's
thank you.
Hey, man, it wouldn't be what it is without you, pal. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And a huge shout out to our friends at Cougar Renewable Energy. They're celebrating 10 years this year as well, doing incredible things. And I mean, sky is the limit for this solar company. There's so much more than a solar company. You can learn more about what they're doing on their website, kubi.ca. Innovative solar solutions for every home and business. They're powering communities with clean, efficient solar energy tailored to your needs. There's employment opportunities, perennially for that matter, in Kamloops, Lethbridge, Calgary, and Edmonton. You can also get a free quote today on their website. That's kubi.ca. So we talked to John E. Marriott a couple of weeks ago, and I mean, here's the Coles notes of it. And Johnny, if you want to load up that short, we'll get to it in just a quick second. John's a conservation photographer. He's sponsored by Canon Cameras. Kind of everybody knows who he is, and he's passionate about wildlife, to say the least. He's a co-founder of Exposed Wildlife Conservancy, and so he here's the story. He's been tracking this cougar, photographing it for like 4 years, and he comes across what appears to be a sort of evidence of a cougar hunt. And so he follows it. He was showing it all on his Instagram. We were talking to you about it. Go back in our archives, watch the full interview if you want his assessment of it and the backstory. He makes, for him, a discovery that basically ruined his year. And that was the cougar that had left behind 2 cubs, had been killed legally by hunters. What jumped out from John's assessment of it to me was legal but unethical. Now, there have been changes to cougar hunting protocol in Alberta. Some have welcomed it, including outfitters, including hunters, obviously, that see economic and sporting opportunity. And then there are folks that are obviously vehemently against all of this. And I'm going to welcome Mark Hall here in just a quick second. We've had Mark on the show before. Mark is a passionate hunter. He's an advocate for the sport. He's the director of the Blood Origins Canada Foundation. He's the host of the Hunter Conservationist podcast. We reached out to Mark when we wanted an informed perspective on the pro hunting side when Alberta changed how it was dealing with problem grizzlies. Do you remember that? So when Mark pushed back on the short that we're about to show you, we take it seriously. He didn't like how it was presented. He's taken issue with it. So we said, well, come join us on the show and let's talk about it. And that's what we're about to do. But first, for those of you that may not have seen it, here's the context.
It just sent me into a state of shock. 4 o'clock in the afternoon, drove out towards Gap Lake. I discovered a bighorn sheep dead. Cougar had jumped over a little private fence and broken its neck. And so I staked it out. I saw these people walking in the background with dogs, and I looked through binoculars and was shocked to discover it was a cougar hound truck. It was cougar hunters. And they had 3 big trucks, big cougar hound box in the back, followed the sled tracks. And right away, there was kitten tracks all over the place. They'd separated the adult and the kitten. Female cougar had been killed. There was blood on the ground. This was a cougar that I had tracked for 4 winters now. She was an amazing mature adult female. It was super unfortunate that she made this bighorn sheep kill right by the road. The guide outfitters found out about it. GPS collared hounds chased her into a tree. I could see when they shot her that she was able to jump out of the tree and get back down into the ground and run a bit. The worst part was I found kitten tracks.
But I was always under the impression that you didn't kill the mom with cubs.
From my tracking experience, I know those hunters knew there were kittens involved. So it's just really unsettling. Unfortunately, this is legal in Alberta right now. You can kill mother cougars with kittens, 3 to 4 months old. I recognize the vehicle. I've seen them around before. This guide outfitter gets paid a $7,000 bounty. The Wild Sheep Foundation, which is a US-based trophy hunting organization, have an Alberta chapter, and they've funneled money into that Alberta chapter that is then going to the Alberta Professional Outfitters Society, where they want to eradicate cougars so they can have more sheep to kill. They are offering $7,000 per female cougar to $4,000 for male cougars. So they're actually offering more for female cougars. So everyone who's always heard from cougar hunters, oh, we only target the big old males, that's just total BS. Just simply unethical, though, in my mind.
So that was Johnny Marriott on our show as we welcome the director of the Blood Origins Canada Foundation, Mark Hall, back to the show. Mark, I want to thank you for making time for us. Speak. I've already sent you a private message. I said, speak freely. Don't hold back. Let's get into it. This is what Real Talk's all about. What pissed you off about that reel?
I think the big thing is the first thing I saw was just a whole bunch of emotion, which is fine. It obviously was traumatizing, for John, but as the story kind of unfolded when he was on your show, I wasn't seeing a lot of kind of let's just slow down a second here and let's take a step back. Let's take some first principle thinking about this, apply some logic. Look, are we dealing with circumstantial evidence? Are we dealing with direct evidence? I started to see the narrative starting to kind of develop of this humans to villain kind of thing, setting hunters up as being the villains in this story. The imagery that was used, where the cougar was being shot out of the tree and skinned and stuff. I literally had people saying, oh my God, he was there and witnessed this cougar being killed and he was able to videotape it. No, that was actually from the Meat Eater TV series, and that was Stephen Ranella. I know one of the guide, actually the houndsman that was there on that particular hunt. The female had killed a mountain sheep, and there's this picture of this big, huge ram. I've seen the pictures of the sheep that was killed, and it was a ewe. So I started to see a bunch of pieces coming together. There wasn't the context, and I just thought for somebody that doesn't know about this, geez, you kind of feel like you're sitting in the jump seat of the Millennium Falcon and they punch it into hyperdrive and there's just everything's coming at you. And I'm just thinking to myself, how can the public sort through all of this when there's so much emotion? Immediately I saw some science being misquoted, those sorts of things. So I've spent a lot of time over the last few weeks unpacking that actual event. And, I just want to preface why I came on the show. I just want to share with your listeners what I've learned about what actually has happened here and some of the claims and some of the science around cougar management and cougars themselves and bighorn sheep. And I'm just hoping with you, we can kind of foster a better understanding of this whole scenario so that your listeners have I think they deserve, a little bit more, but I'm not here to change anybody's mind, including yours, about hunting. That is not on my mind.
Well, you never know. Maybe you will change somebody's mind. I don't want to assume that everybody's seen every episode that we've ever done or heard everything I've ever said about hunting. So mine's pretty simple. Cards on the table. I have a ton of respect for hunters. I married into a hunting family, and I think that it's an incredible move from a sustainability standpoint, from a recreation standpoint, when people fill their freezers and feed their families. We talked to Jordan Tutu on this program about his family's history with hunting in Rankin Inlet and whaling and remarkable stuff. And I enjoyed elk carpaccio this summer, by the way, that my brother-in-law, just unbelievable. I think it's amazing. And trophy hunting really pisses me off. It pisses me off when people kill animals like grizzly bears. It pisses me off when people kill cougars for sport. It pisses me off when people shoot lions and elephants and everything else. And I've heard all the arguments, and people say it's good for the community, this, that, and the other. That's where I stand. I just want to put my cards on the table. I don't want people to think that you're walking into a hostile anti-hunting environment. Because as a matter of fact, Mark, I can also let you know that this audience is not inherently 100% anti-hunting at all. But the cougar hunt story did rile up a lot of people. Number one, I think because there are folks that are cynical about where the provincial government is coming from, changing a lot of these regulations. The minister in charge, Todd Loewen, I'm not saying that there is, direct conflict of interest here. In other words, that he's padding his pockets with the cougar hunt, but he does have an interest in an outfitting company. Now, there's two sides on that too, right? Number one, it means he knows what's going on in that industry. Number two, people say, well, he could stand to benefit from changing this. So I think that's one of the reasons why people are choked, is because there's a political angle to this. And number two, because as you've alluded to, two young cubs were orphaned here. They're now at the Calgary Zoo. Thankfully, I guess they were able to be captured. But for a lot of people, like I even say in that short, my understanding was always that, hunter doesn't take down a cow moose if there's a calf right beside her, right?
No, I mean, for sure. I completely value everything you've said and your perspectives and everything. First off, I'm just thankful to see you kind of wearing a sweater, like you don't have a tie on. Like I didn't.
That's on purpose,
sure
Mark.
I was overdressed or underdressed.
No, I wasn't gonna wear a tie to talk about hunting.
If I was gonna get thrown out of the office and and have to go talk to the French Prime Minister or something. So, anyways, so can I just kind of dive into some of these
do it like here's what I think. So you say, like, you've been ruminating on this for the past few weeks. You feel like the story was presented, I mean, you haven't used the words, but you're sort of saying like it wasn't in good faith. You're basically saying, like, I've seen in your post that you said like the footage was kind of manipulative. You believe that people were, whether it was us or John trying to get people's emotions supercharged. I will say it's not that hard to do with a story like this.
Sure.
But why don't you present this story through your eyes, through your understanding what happened?
Yeah, absolutely. And my understanding is based on talking to people that were there, to the hunters that were there. So first of all, there was no American hunter. This was not a guided hunt. I think that's been established. It actually bothers me that, it was presented that way immediately. And the picture of the truck kind of started to spread through social media. And it was like, hunt these guys down. And like, you started to see all this, torch and pitchfork kind of thing. Like, I mean, we're already like instantly moving to these like inciting violence against hunters. And that's the time where like, I want to stop and back things up. So these were residents of Alberta that were out hunting. So the orphan of these kittens, the kittens were not present at the hunt location when the hunters were there.
True.
There were no tracks at the kill scene. They were not with it. They were not with the female when they were treed. And these folks told me they took a lot of time because they knew it was a smaller cat. They knew it was a female. They looked it over. They looked the situation. They actually bumped the cat from one tree to another to better assess this cat and get it in a position they could see a bit better. So hunters are, they're looking for things. They're looking around, and they have told me there was no kittens there. There were no kitten tracks. And they said from the bottom of their heart, if there would have been the slightest indication that she had kittens there, they would have called off this hunt. I've talked to people that have been inspected this cat, that have handled this female that was killed. She's aged at 3 years old by gum progression is the main thing. So sort of the claim that she's been tracked for the last 4 years is, to me, kind of a spurious claim, because experts are saying this cat is only 3 years old. As well, the evidence on this female is strongly suggesting that she is not nursing, and she has never nursed in her life. They can actually tell from teat development if an animal has ever nursed at all, and the evidence is suggesting that she hasn't.
Hang on. So what are you saying? Are you saying you're saying these aren't her kittens?
So let me get there, with this. So she's 3 years old. Female cougars can be bred and are typically bred between 2 and 3 years old. So she would have had to be on the very low end of, almost maybe potentially being very close to still being with her own mother when she was bred, to have kittens that are of the age, like 6 months age right now. So not that that's biologically impossible. I'm not saying that it's not, but to me, it's another piece of evidence that's suggesting that she is not the mother of these kittens. So I think what we got to do here now is to take a step back and say, okay, if these are truly orphan kittens, and maybe that was their mother that was killed, but maybe it's not. There are other possible causes. It is possible that, yes, this female was the mother. It's also possible that the female was killed. Another female that was their mother was killed sometime in that geographic area over the course of the winter. How could that have happened? It could have happened from another hunt. Yes, it's completely a possibility. That female might have been killed trying to defend her kittens against a big dominant male who may wanted to kill the kittens. It's called infanticide. She may have put her life on the line and paid for it. She's out there somewhere where nobody knows where her body is. She may, the actual mother may have died trying to pull down a big animal like an elk. Cougars are amazing that pound for pound, any wild cat in the world, cougars take down the largest prey animals, even compared to tigers and lions. They sometimes don't survive that on big animals like elk and moose or feral horses. Now, the other possibility is their mother was still out there alive. She could have been killed by a car. That's the other option. And she's laying out there somewhere. Nobody knows. But the other option is the mother was still out there. So there was a study done down in the United States, Idaho, Utah, where they collared a bunch of female cougars, and females with kittens about the same age as these ones. They actually found that the mothers were spending about 30% of their time upwards of 1 kilometer or more away from her kittens. The most frequent part of the day in which she was away from her kittens was between 11 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon. That is the exact time frame that this hunt took place. So I really let's stop here for a second and look at this possibility that what John encountered was circumstantial. How would people feel if there is a female out there somewhere wondering what happened to her kittens? Part of what really bothers me here is in whose best interest was it to capture them and put them in a zoo? The original accusation was that they were 3-month-old kittens, the size of the tracks. Experts looked at the tracks. They were 3 months old. The Calgary Zoo officials said they're about 6 months of age. According to a report that I read from the Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks Agency, is orphan cougar kittens at this age have a 70% chance of surviving on their own in the wild. And we took that away from them, regardless of what happened to their mother, whether it was this hunt, something that was natural, or any other type of circumstance. We took away a 70% chance of them surviving and living wild to 100% chance they're going to die in a zoo.
Yeah. I do agree with you that I think it's a shame that they're taken out of the wild for sure. I do agree with you. I also, Mark, honestly, I've been watching this O.J. Simpson documentary, and you'd be right there beside Johnny Cochran and Rob Shapiro with all these alternative theories. This is incredible. I know I can feel John Marriott tearing his hair out as you're describing. An audience member here says, don't forget, it could have been a Yeti as well. But you are coming up with other, perhaps there's all these other things. I mean, when it comes back to it, Plain Power 2 wants to focus our conversation back into saying, whoa, in our live chat, powered by Park Power, says, was this a hunt? Like, was this a trophy hunt? Was this a hunt for recreational purposes? Was this wildlife management? What was these guys were not out there trying to protect their flock of sheep. These guys are not out there trying to protect their horses or because it was calving season, right? This was let's call it what it is. Do we all agree? It was a legal trophy hunt, right?
Yeah, a legal hunt, definitely, by residents of Alberta.
And so would you acknowledge that the average person, maybe outside the hunting community, or even, I'm sure, hunters, we've heard from a lot of hunters on this that are supportive of our coverage of it, and in particular, what's really upset them is the cougars, the kittens, the cubs. Like that's where everybody, I think, is centering around. Some people obviously don't love the hunting practices that are used, GPS dogs and the like, with cougars. But do you see a difference? Is there a division in your mind, or is it two different conversations, whether you're talking about hunting for sustenance or hunting for trophies?
Well, I think every single hunter has different motives for hunting. Interestingly enough, so many people will say, I hunt for food, I hunt for meat, these types of things. A lot of people are acceptant of that. Studies that have been done on the motives of hunters, actually that doesn't rank the highest. The number one reason why most people participate in hunting, Canadians anyways, is because they like being in the outdoors and they enjoy being with friends and family. Generally, meat ranks lower down in that order. So whether you're a houndsman who love, to work with their dogs, I have a hunting dog. We hunt birds together. That's why I hunt, because he loves being out there. So everybody has a different reason. Trying to separate, sort of some type of hunting as trophy hunting and some type is not. I mean, that's a whole entire 2-hour episode. To some people, it's regardless if the hunter's motive is to shoot a deer or a moose for fur, if they keep any non-edible part of that animal, it was a trophy hunt. So this is not a this versus that. It's people have different, Google the word trophy hunting, and I think it come up with like 100,000 or 200,000 different definitions of it. It's pretty complicated. The International Union for the Conservation of Nature, their definition of trophy hunting is actually if the hunter pays anything. So the deer hunter in Alberta that wants some meat, some venison for their freezer, buys a game tag according to that definition. And I've spoke to the scientists that work in their program. They would be like, yes, that is trophy hunting. According to them, the only thing in the world, the only form of hunting that's not trophy hunting is what Indigenous people do, because they do not pay for it. So it's a really convoluted thing. And I try to avoid putting labels on people or putting people in buckets. A houndsman could be hunting in the wintertime and then be a deer hunter, a moose hunter in the fall. So does this label shift? Are they a good person one day and a bad person the next day? It's a convoluted, rabbit hole to go down. And at the end of the day, I tend to I want to step back and look at the big picture here. Is hunting hurting cougars in Alberta? Is the ecosystem in Alberta going to collapse because of this one cougar or the removal of 2 kittens? Some are claiming that it will. And I don't think it will from a big picture. I completely get the emotions around putting this label of, trophy hunting on cougars, on bighorn sheep. But, for me, I can't do that because I don't know what they're after, what they're up to. I understand what's happening with the intentional hunting of predators in bighorn sheep winter range, if we want to go there. The bighorn sheep is Alberta's provincial mammal. It plays a really, really integral part of this whole entire story, if you want to call it that.
And they're also a highly sought after animal for hunters who will pay big bucks to travel up and hunt them, right? And I'm not saying that that's inherently bad.
Yep.
That's just a fact. Like that's also a highly sought after animal. I want to ask you just about conservation efforts. Any legit and proud hunter that I know is a proud conservationist as well. And I know that when we talk about these minimum numbers, I'm not going to bullshit anybody here, Mark. I'm not a wildlife biologist. I'm not doing any surveying on my own. We see numbers. I think that there's sort of a general consensus that 1,500 cougars in the province would represent a healthy-ish population, and the most recent numbers that we have indicate that Alberta is pretty much right around that number, yet is expanding the opportunities for hunters to hunt these cats, in particular females. Are you concerned when it comes to the balance of nature, when it comes to the sustainability, when it comes to the future of cougars in the province of Alberta and Western Canada, that now might not be the time, or it might not be the right move for the province to be expanding the hunt?
Well, I think that's part of what we need to talk to here about this idea of expanding the hunt, because this is part of the narrative that's been developed around individuals that are trying to turn this into a political issue or make this a partisan issue. And I just think that is such a dangerous way to take a conservation or management issue. When you go back, way back into the 1930s and look at cougar populations in Alberta and accounts of the history of when Europeans first got there. Like everywhere in North America, predators were persecuted and their populations, declined, but they've been coming back, and their populations are expanding in range. Their population numbers are increasing. Interestingly enough, there's been studies done in Alberta where the cougars actually do fairly well around people, around cut blocks, around oil and gas developments, because it creates a lot of edge, and that attracts deer. And we've created more white-tailed deer on the species. We've introduced, domestic livestock. So as a species, cougars are actually doing pretty good, and the data actually and the history of cougars in Alberta are in my opinion doing quite well. They're a very resilient species. Actually, they've done studies down in the United States where they purposely killed and trapped them to drive their populations to very low levels and see what happens. And if the prey species are abundant on the landscape, some of these cougar populations are recovering in 9 months to within 2 years to their prior level. So they are a resilient species if they have habitat, if they have abundant prey species. Alberta's history in managing cougars is one of moving towards more conservation, more ideas around sustainability, more ideas around multiple use. The trend over Alberta's history that I've seen is they set quotas. The harvest levels have been historically, from what the periods I've seen, they don't even reach the actual quotas. Alberta's Cougar Management Plan recognizes the intrinsic value of cougars to Albertans. Some want to hunt, some want to know that they're there, some want to have viewing and photographing opportunities. And generally, as far as setting hunting quotas, like this whole fervor around hunting quotas. So in the area this female was taken, the hunting quota for females was not increased last year. There was a increase from 1 female allowable harvest to 2, I think back in 2021. Generally, when I look at all of the cougar management zones in Alberta, the quotas are very low. They're talking about only giving hunters between 2 and 4. I think some of the highest quotas I've seen are 5. The biologists close the hunting season on males, on females when those quotas are reached. Over time, the female harvest is coming down in Alberta, like when you go back into the 70s. And so, yeah, I think even in the presence of hunting, the Alberta cougar population is doing fine. There's no threat to cougars from hunting.
Well, except for the cougars that get hunted
and run over by trains and cars. And, that's another thing. So this zone where this cougar was killed, Cougar Management Area number 6, Bow Valley.
Yeah.
I went back 5 years. You can go back 10 years. The hunter harvest in that zone has been zero for many, many years. But humans are killing cougars in the Bow Valley, and the leading cause of cougar mortality in the Bow historically with zero hunter harvest has been trains and cars, where cars on the highway are the leading cause of mortality. So people driving back and forth are probably killing females with kittens that nobody ever knows about.
I mean, I'm not saying that that's never happened. I've never seen cougar roadkill in my life. I'm not saying that that's never happened. I'm not saying it couldn't happen. And I will not argue with you in that humans are the most invasive species on the planet. I mean, that's a fact. You hear of these. I mean, who is it? Split lip, or who's the boss? Who's the grizz that's been hit by trains like 3 times and survived? That's most of them aren't that lucky. I know. A grizzly sow was killed on the highway just about a month ago. I mean, it's obviously brutal, and obviously, humans push these wild animals into they don't push. We push ourselves into their jurisdictions, and obviously there's an inevitable result there. You may have seen on the show, we talked about it, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, doorbell cam footage, like residential surveillance cam footage near Lesser Slave Lake that showed a cougar dragging, I don't know the breed of dog, but it looked like a German Shepherd across a property, and it was sent to us by Davis, an audience member up there. It was his friend's video. It was his friend's house. He says, I'll tell you what, Jespo, he says, I can appreciate the perspectives and positions I'm hearing on the show around opposition to the cougar hunt. He says, but I'll tell you this, if that cat is walking across my family's property, it's toast. And I don't know that there's many people that would disagree with him. I think that most people with common sense would we hear the same thing with the coyotes. I mean, some people don't like that coyotes are getting snared or trapped or shot or what have you. But you talk to anybody that works in ag, you talk to any rancher, you talk to anybody that's telling stories about coyotes pulling calves out of the cows while they're being born. I mean, then it's a completely different ball game. So I want to recognize, and I think we have many times already, there's nuance to this conversation. I think that there's a difference when you're talking about, land management, when you're talking about personal preservation, when you're talking about hunting. The sustainability angle's big. I recognize the tradition and history of hunting. I don't think that there's a necessarily 100% black or white, right or wrong answer, but I don't blame people for having strong opinions. It's very much different. Like, look at this. We opened the show talking about tariffs. And for the average person, I mean, you even referenced the Oval Office meeting with Zelensky, and I mean, we got a million things on our mind right now,
Absolutely.
And it's like, for a lot of people, you'll hear that the average American household expected these tariffs will cost them about $2,000 annually. We'll see what the cost is on Canadians, but then you show somebody a cougar that's treed by dogs, and they'll be way more pissed off about the cougar getting shot out of the tree than they will be about the tariffs on steel and aluminum and oil and gas and auto parts, because it's visceral. It like resonates with people. It's like it's the animal kingdom. It's a fellow living being. And you know what I'm saying? So I understand. And I understand that people also have wonderful memories of like hunting with like mom and dad, or like fishing and like the incredible family time out. So I just want to say, for me, my perspective on this, it's a bit of a dog's breakfast, and I try to sort of come to a point where I have empathy and reason and evidence and open-mindedness and arrive at a result. And I'm grateful for your perspective on this. I recognize where you're coming from, obviously, as a passionate advocate. People can learn more at bloodorigins.org about what you do, and check out your podcast as well. As mentioned, we're talking to Mark Hall. His podcast is the Hunter Conservationist podcast. Before I thank you for your time, do you feel like you've been respected on the show? Do you feel like you've had an opportunity to present your perspective? Is there anything that we've not talked about that you think is key to this?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's quite a few things we haven't talked about. This whole thing about the bounty and the Wild Sheep Foundation paying for that, completely not true. There's that. There's the whole idea of partisan politics of trying to say that the government in power right now is doing all these horrible things for cougars and opening up and increasing the quotas. Interestingly enough, during the 5 years the NDP was in power, they were actually killing more hunting, accidental and conflict kills by the Conservation Officer Service double what's been done on an average annual basis than the last 3 years in Alberta. It doesn't mean one government is worse than the other. It means that, and they are using the same cougar management plan actually between, the two parties. But things change, wildlife populations change, winters change, hunter success changes, conflict changes, mortality on railways change. And so these things, go up and down. And it doesn't, to try to make this a partisan issue, I think is just, it's just going against the principles of conservation. We need to step away, let the wildlife biologists look at, they tend to want to look at data on mortality, hunter caused and non-hunter caused over periods of like 5 and 10 years. Year to year it's too much noise. It doesn't really give an indication of what the ebb and flow of the ecosystem is. So, yeah, those are a couple things I could definitely get into a little bit more about, what's happening with, bighorn sheep in Alberta. People should be proud that Alberta's bighorn sheep population is so robust, has survived the episodic events of the Movi infection, that Alberta is the hub in North America for rewilding bighorn sheep all over the continent that have been lost. And they can do that because they have very, very healthy and sustainable herds like the cattleman herd. Going all the way back before I was born, a small part of that success in maintaining bighorn sheep in Alberta has been that there's been hunters on critical bighorn sheep winter range, helping to remove cougars. Not all cougars. Cougars are known to become specialists on bighorn sheep. So it's not the total number of cougars that is an issue for bighorn sheep. It's whether or not one that comes in there whose behavior focuses on killing bighorn sheep. They can take half a herd out in one winter. So Alberta's history, their heritage, your conservation legacy of being able to give North America bighorn sheep, a small part of that has been that hunters have been on the winter range for decades, helping to selectively remove some of these cougars that are targeting bighorn sheep. So,
right. Mark, thanks for making time, man. Thanks for showing up and having the conversation. Like, this is what we're all about, man. It's
absolutely. And it's good, buddy. I mean, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate your work as well. And just like, challenging people, right? Challenging people, like whatever. You're not going to get everybody on your side. I don't think I have a side on this. I guess maybe I do. But the point is, I want to talk it out. And I thank you for showing up for it.
Hey, Bet. Thanks for the opportunity.
You got it, man. That's Mark Hall. You can check out his work again at bloodorigins.org. Looking at Real Talk live chat powered by Park Power. Idris is watching us, says, I come from a hunting-friendly family in Nova Scotia. And we had guns around. Said ultimately traded a rifle for a camera and became a bird watcher. Says conservation is key and expanding hunts needs to be data-driven and balanced. Ytrium says, so if cougars are dying from trains and cars, then we should stop hunting them to offset those numbers. Interesting perspective on that one. Cherie's watching on YouTube, says, I don't care. Like, it's still a trophy hunt. Yeah, kind of interesting perspective. I mean, like, Mark, I mean, he's presenting his perspective when he says if you kept any remnant, if you hunt a moose for meat, but you keep any remnant, then it's a trophy hunt. Like, technically, that's true. But I think also the motivation, and listen, like maybe this isn't what this is all about. Maybe the whole point isn't like, was it a trophy hunt? Was it a hunt for sustenance? Like, I went on the show a couple of weeks ago and I said, nobody's hunting cougars for meat. And then we promptly get people sending us videos online of folks preparing cougar meat and eating it. I don't think that's, not a hunter. But I'm pretty sure that that's not the number one motivating factor. A bunch of people going out and wanting to eat these cats. I'm not saying that nobody would eat them, but maybe that's, again, a red herring. Maybe this is just obfuscating this entire conversation. Maybe this isn't about like trophy versus sustenance or what have you. Somebody in our chat earlier, I don't remember who you are, I apologize. Somebody said something like, Ryan, it's, you feel this way about cougars because they're pretty. because they're magnificent. And I've talked about this on the show before. I'm an absolute 100% complete hypocrite on this stuff. Absolutely 100%. Like, there's nothing better than like hauling a tuna out of the water and turning it into ceviche, Johnny, like to maybe a nice raw tuna dish or something on the back of the boat, and eating it 5 minutes after you pulled it out of the water. Yet somebody does that to a dolphin, and I will lose my mind. What does that make me? It makes me a hypocrite. Yeah. It really bothers me to see dogs treeing a cougar and have the cougar blasted out of the tree. But if this is some sort of other animal that had harmed my property or something that I cared about, then I'd probably cheer it on. What does that make me? Probably a hypocrite. I think that it's a freeing reality to be able to have your cards on the table and say, here's how I feel about this. Here are some possible discrepancies or inconsistencies in my perspective, but unapologetically, this is how I feel about it. So I hope that this got the audience to think a little bit. I don't know if it changed anybody's minds. Did it change your mind? Did it influence the way you feel about the story?
Not really. I think Mark's he's very knowledgeable and all that. But yeah, to me, there was a lot, like, I was finding it hard to keep up with some of the, like, this could have happened, this could have happened, this could have happened. I think it's great they investigated after what happened, and now we kind of know some of the facts, but some of that other stuff was kind of like, we don't really know if this happened, but this could happen, this could happen. But I do think it's weird that, like, of course we investigated after it happened, right? Like, it's not like maybe we should take the steps before to make sure, but hey, I mean, this stuff, this was legal, right? So
it was legal.
This is the problem.
They did not break the law. They did not break the law.
It's an opinion, right?
So you've got Mark. You've got Mark,
right?
who's passionate about defending hunting, and I respect that. If I didn't respect Mark or his position, we wouldn't have him on the show. But I also respect where John Marriott's coming from. Maybe one day we'll get the two of them in studio together, and they can hash it out. I wonder what that might be like. But at the end of the day, Idris follows up and says, people eating cougars, really, bro? Like, yeah, bro, somebody sent me this video, and I'm not making fun. It was actually like, listen, I'm not going to sort of poke fun at it. I will just say this. They pull it out and they're like, here's the back strap. And it kind of, like, you wouldn't know, like, if you're looking at it. Sorry, I'm going to talk meat for a second for all my plant-based friends. Forgive me. Visit us back in 90 seconds. But if you showed me, like, the backstrap of a cougar versus the backstrap of a black bear versus the backstrap of a deer, like, the average person on the street would have no way of knowing which is which, right? Our minds are, I remember when we were traveling down in Ecuador, like 25 years ago, and we were having this dish called cuy, and it was not too bad. And then you found out that cuy is guinea pig. And I was like, and then I just sort of tried to dip the protein into a little bit more sauce, surround it with a bit more rice, right? Because our minds start to factor in. Yeah. Like, what's the difference of eating the protein of a deer or the protein of a cougar? Maybe not much taste-wise, maybe very different. But yeah, we sort of think of eating different animals a little bit differently, don't we? Yeah, I do think if somebody was going to come onto this show and try to convince me or you that the prime motivation for hunting cougars is to eat them, I don't think anybody would be able to keep a serious face or believe it.
Yeah. I think maybe we should maybe next we have an Indigenous voice on to kind of go into that, because they're the people who go out there and they're using every piece of the animal. They're living off the land. Yeah. They're paying respect to the land. And I just feel like I want to hear what they would have to say about this, because I don't think a cougar, I mean, obviously there's fur and there's meat, but I don't think it's something people really go for rather than hunting an elk or a deer or these other things that you could. Yeah. And I'm sure there's a reason for that, right?
And also I kind of fear that just as like that we're losing focus of what this is all about. Like the question ultimately is like, what is this all about? Right?
Yeah,
like I understand because
the kittens. That's what the main
about the kittens,
focus
right?
was.
So Mark made some compelling points. Like, number one, he's saying people are posting photos of the truck, and it's kind of like, go after these hunters, and he's not entirely wrong. I will say, when John posted the photo of the truck, now it's a pickup truck and it has the dogs in the back, these hunting dogs. Nothing wrong with hunting dogs, and by the way, not their fault. But like, he did blur out the license plate, so that's a small detail, but a relevant detail. I didn't see anybody calling to like kill the hunters, but maybe there were death threats I didn't see. None of that is productive. None of that is acceptable. Again, these hunters did not break the law. I thought it was interesting when Mark divulged to us in our conversation that we just had that he had a conversation with the hunters involved in this hunt, and they say, had they known there were kittens, and by the way, John Marriott says, of course they knew there were kittens. He says there was evidence everywhere. He says there were multiple tracks around a kill site, around a bighorn sheep kill site. You can watch the interview. So I know John would lose his mind were he with us today at the assertion or the assumption that these hunters didn't know there were kittens. But let's give them the benefit of the doubt for a second, okay? Let's suspend your cynicism and give them the benefit of the doubt. Mark makes a compelling point, and I think it's relevant as well and interesting as well, that the hunters told him that had they known that there were two kittens, they would have called off the hunt. That says a lot to me. Nobody's saying throw them in jail. Nobody's saying, what they did was legal. But I do think it's relevant, and I think it's maybe sort of like should fuel the conversation or a little bit, enrich our understanding of why there's a lot of pushback on this one. That even the hunters themselves say they wouldn't have done it had they known there were the two kittens.
Mm-hmm. And I did like how he kind of called us, because we do want to be called when we're showing inaccurate information. Like we're not the media, we're not journalists, but at the same time, we don't try to get people riled up with fake photos and fake video imagery. The reason we used that video from the meat eater or whatever it was because it was a very close depiction of what had happened. Was it exactly what happened? No. But I mean, you go read a news article about Danielle Smith talking somewhere and they show a picture of her talking, but she wasn't at that event. I mean, it's just a reference. I feel what we were using, right? We were using a reference. We weren't trying to paint anything as it wasn't. We were just showing a cougar getting hit out of a tree.
That's getting into the weeds. Yeah. I'll respect Mark's point that some people thought that was a video of the actual hunt, but number one, respectfully, that sounds a little gullible to me, but that's called B-roll. Like when you put stuff together, every time we're talking about the oil sands and we're showing you drone footage of the oil sands, that's not the relay drone in action live at the oil sands. That's file footage. So that's fine. But listen, at the end of the day, wanted to have Mark on. I saw that he had been critical of our coverage. I said, come be critical on the show. Want the show to have integrity. Want you to hold our feet to the fire. And that includes you in the audience as well. To talk at RyanJesperson.com. Let us know what you think about this.
We saw what the audience thought here today. This is one of the things. And I know that our audience, some of them are farmers. Some of them are hunters. A lot of 100%. Them are rural. And a lot of them, I mean, I didn't see anyone agreeing with this in the chat, right? So.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say that it was disproportionately in favor of the Cougars. Is that a fair assessment? But again, and I appreciate Mark comes on and he says, I'm not trying to change your mind. And I'm not trying to change anybody's mind either. We're just talking it out. That's the whole point of the show. Listen, this show does not happen without the team at California Closets. And right now, if spring for you means spring cleaning to an entirely different degree, you're going to get absolutely serious about decluttering, getting organized, and being proud of your space, you're going to want to request a free consultation today, Junior, at CaliforniaClosets.ca. You can sit down with their team of talented designers in their beautiful design studios, whether you're in Calgary or Edmonton, and check out custom closets, systems, and solutions for the entire home, including the primary bedroom, the guest bedroom that's doubling as a home office, the laundry room, boot room, whatever it is. California Closets can work with any space and any budget, and all of their work is guaranteed for life. We are proud, satisfied customers. Johnny, our installation went in 8 years ago, and we still love it every single day. We're proud to partner with California Closets. Book that consultation today on their website. Our friends at Friesen Brothers want to remind you of the wonderful things that are happening at all 16 of their locations throughout this year as they celebrate 70 years in business, still family-owned, proudly Alberta-grown and Alberta-owned as well. Friesen Brothers understands that the best family times happen around the dinner table, and that's why they've got their Family Essentials flyer. You can check it out online at friesen.com or pick up a copy in-store. Check out their St. Patty's Day 20% off meat sale. That's coming up, of course, and seniors discount days through the month. All the details at friesen.com. And I want to thank our friends at Complete Care Restoration for the work that they're doing across the province of Alberta, getting folks back into a position of peace of mind after disruptive events. It could be an unexpected fire or smoke damage from a fire nearby. Maybe it's a burst pipe. I'm going to divulge something that I told you privately today. It's been in the back of my mind the entire time we're recording this episode. We have a new water leak.
Oh, you got problems.
In our 110-year-old home. I don't know where it's coming from. It started this morning, and I'm just pretending right now that it is not happening. But I know that this could lead to black mold, and I know who I'm going to call to help me deal with this. It's Complete Care Restoration. No bullshit. We've used them before. They did an incredible job building our studio. And maybe I'll be telling you about what they did in our kitchen, John. Maybe I'll be telling you about that in the weeks to come. You can find them online. Emergency services available 24/7 at completecarerestoration.ca. Super chat Ken with another $5. Dude, honestly, we appreciate you, Ken. He says, congratulations, Johnny. 3 years on Real Talk. It's the best move Ryan has ever made outside of his wife and kids. And I think, Ken,
that's a big compliment. Thank you very much.
That's a fair assessment.
Thank you.
That's a fair assessment. Yeah. The top story today, and this is obviously, I think, a story that's resonating literally around the world. I think sometimes, opinion, look at this, Johnny already putting up the photo of Donald Trump before I even went into it because it's so obvious right now that everybody's paying attention because these are the big global players, Johnny, right? Like this is, you got the three trading partners, the root of NAFTA and the USMCA, and it's Canada, the US, and Mexico, essentially in a trade war that the Chinese are involved. They've got their own tariff battle going on right now with the United States, and this is something that'll obviously affect the global economy. We had a really, really great conversation back to back in our most recent episode, the 3rd of March, with political scientist Dr. Dwayne Brad about this, and Doug Griffiths, former provincial cabinet minister, now the CEO of the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce. And Doug, in particular, responding to what Pierre Poilievre was putting out there, which is, have you ever heard Pierre Poilievre and the Liberals sound so similar to each other over the past couple of weeks? Like literally, like there's not huge differences in the positions that Justin Trudeau and Pierre Poilievre, and for that matter, Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland are taking right now on this. And we asked Doug about it. And this is relevant, I think, to every single audience member. Last month, we had Real Talkers checking out our website from 37 different countries. I don't care which of the 37 you're from. What we heard from Doug Griffiths on March 3rd is relevant to you.
Regardless of what the president does, though, we can't rely on him, and we can't rely on the Americans anymore. We've learned our lesson from 10 years of helplessness. We need to take back control of our economy and bring home a strong, self-reliant, and sovereign nation. Simply put, we need to bring it home. We must bring home our jobs, our resources, our production, our supply chains. We must not only harvest our resources, but we must build LNG plants and ports that can get those resources to overseas markets. That means tax cuts and greenlighting massive resource projects to bring home our jobs, businesses, and money, and to become less dependent on the Americans.
I literally just got off the phone with a couple of chambers of commerce in the United States this morning, and they equally shook their head and said, I don't know what the hell we're doing this for. This is going to impact our economy all across the United States negatively. So I don't know that even the president thinks it's a good idea. I think he's using it as a threat. This is just the way he negotiates and asserts powers. I don't want us to waste a good crisis. And I've said it over and over again. These threats of the tariffs have woken us up to the fact that we don't have interprovincial free trade. We don't have the infrastructure in place to get all of our products, not just oil and gas, but all of our products to Tidewater from all across this country. We have been frankly, lazy and complacent in having the world's largest economy, easy and convenient to the south of us where we can trade. And so whatever we do, if the tariffs come into place to make our economy stronger and better, is exactly what we need to do if the tariffs don't come into place to make our economy stronger and better. And so I really hope that all of our governments and our businesses are anticipating what we can do to make ourselves more resilient instead of hoping that the immediate crisis from a chaotic leader, the most unpredictable one, like you said, in the last 100 years, does something crazy. Because if the tariffs don't come in or they do come in, we'll find something new and crazy that he's going to do to us next year or the year after. I mean, we've got 4 years of this. We need to make plans now on what we're going to do to make Canada's economy more resilient, which includes investing in infrastructure so we can all get to Tidewater with all of our products, to make sure that we reduce interprovincial trade barriers that can save us $200 billion nationally and increase our GDP by 4%. Like, we need to do these things anyway.
That was Edmonton Chamber President and CEO Doug Griffiths on our March 3rd episode. You can find the full conversation, which was a good one. Gets into the provincial budget as well. Does kind of a deep dive on the business implications of it. March 3rd episode on the podcast and on YouTube. Shout out to Ken K. We got the Ken combo in the super chat today. $10 from Ken K. Thanks, buddy. Says he says, am I missing this? Sometimes I feel a little older than the rest of y'all. He says, pair character bowing down saying thank you. Is that a popular GIF? I'll be vulnerable here for a second. I've searched for GIFs as Doug was talking online, trying to, Johnny, you can see on my screen here, I look for every GIF I can find of a pair bowing down saying thank you. So here's a lot of thank yous for you from Ken K on your 3-year anniversary on the show. I don't know.
Why a pair? Well, I do like pears. They're very good.
You a big fan of pears?
Very tasty.
Very tasty.
Yeah, but some great points from Doug that we talked about at the start of the show. Like this, I know it's doom and gloom right now, but this could strengthen Canada. This could teach us to trade better with each other. And like I decided this morning, like even, I'm going to buy like as a DJ, as an MC, as an event planner and executor, I know for a fact that buying, audio visual equipment, speakers, lights, dance lights, microphones, it's cheaper for me to buy them in the States on websites and get them shipped here than it is for me to buy Canadian products or those same products from Ontario, which is where the majority of them are manufactured or are, if you want them shipped out to Alberta. It's cheaper for me to get them from the States, which seems ridiculous to me. It's absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. But I made a decision this morning. I'm like, now that this has begun, every spring I take an inventory of all the equipment I have for events, and then I go, I trade in the old stuff, I get some of the new stock and the new shiny bright stuff. This year I'm just gonna, as of now, I'm gonna rent from local stores here, like Long McQuaid and the like. I'm gonna rent Canadian products, Canadian audiovisual equipment, not all the companies that they sell. And then if I have to buy, if this goes on summer or a year, I will buy Canadian made products like Yorkville and whatever. And I think other people are going to start doing that with everything.
Yeah,
right?
You're paying a little bit more, but you're supporting Canada. You're keeping your money in Canada. Aaron, pardon me, in our live chat says there always has to be an other to bring people together. You're not wrong. Like I said yesterday, yeah. It's like people are uniting under the flag. I'm not pretending like all of a sudden the hardcore Poilievre supporters and like, the new Carney backers or the Trudeau, like that they're all like holding hands and swaying together. That's obviously not the case. It's obviously not going to happen. But I do think that right now, I'm actually encouraged that there are Canadians, like regardless of who you vote for, how you feel, aside from these idiots, jackasses that are supporting the guy wearing the Trump 51 Canada jersey, that honestly, I know I took it easy on the show over that. That like fired me up big time. But I've also learned when something's really pissing you off, what was the deodorant company? Never let them see you sweat. Don't let them know how this is the whole thing in hockey. Like the retaliatory penalty is always the one that winds up in the box. But like that's the stuff that drives me nuts. But I've actually been really encouraged to see Canadians like it's almost like Aaron's right. This kind of other where it's like why can't these liquor stores in Eastern Canada bring in more BC wine or bring in Alberta craft brewers, or why can't we be seeing this more? Like I said, talked about the economic implications across Canada. Let's make it happen. So,
why is it more expensive for me to get something shipped from Ontario than California? It doesn't make sense.
Makes no sense. Yeah. Nash is watching us. Love that name, Nash. On YouTube says just trading within Canada and buying local will not grow our economy enough to carry on like normal. And Nash is not wrong. Mm-hmm. Says we do need to get our energy to the East and West Coast. Period. Obviously, TMX factors into that. Maybe that's a Northern Gateway reference, certainly an Energy East reference. We've talked a lot about pipelines. We can talk more about it. Nash will take your point, and I appreciate it. Mm-hmm. So,
do you think this could cause a recession? This could cause a depression?
Dude, I think that
if this goes on long enough,
I think that people that are at variable interest rates, I think that the people where a drop in the Canadian.
Think of people who are living paycheck to paycheck.
But
right?
for some Canadian businesses, a drop in the Canadian dollar is actually good for them.
Oh, sure.
For a lot of other Canadian businesses, a drop in the Canadian dollar is devastating. Yeah. So, it kind of depends on who you talk to. We'll continue to talk about this. The good news is we do 5 episodes a week, friends. So there's a lot of ground to cover. The good news is that there's no shortage of material. The risk that we run is not ignoring, but failing to leave time for other stories that are just as worthy of our attention, our focus, our discussion, and our debate. And that's where you come in. That's where you can send us an email to talk@ryanjesperson.com. What are we missing? What are we not getting to? What's the perspective you're not hearing here represented on the show? I want to let you know, coming up on tomorrow's episode, that'll be the 5th of March, we're going to check in with an Alberta-based representative that was at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities meetings in Eastern Canada talking about tariff response. We're going to get to that. Plus, we were away for the last month of February. That doesn't mean that we're not going to honor and celebrate Black History Month. We've got an incredible segment coming up on Black cowboys in Western Canada over the past century or so. Should be fascinating. And a quick note before we go, the events link at ryanjesperson.com. Registration's open for the Real Talk Golf Classic.